The Boundary Blueprint: How to Construct Healthy Boundaries to Design a Fence of Emotional Well-Being. You're always overwhelmed by stress. It's not one thing, it's another. You've always heard, if it's not one thing, it's another. Boy, is that bad communication. Life is just happening to you, not for you. We'll talk about how you can control what happens in your future. No one understands you and what you go through on a daily basis. By the end of this video, you'll know when it's time to ask for help and how to ask for it when you really need it. People always violate your boundaries, and you give passes to those consistent line steppers. Good communication will help you reclaim your voice. So when people overstep, you'll know how to get them right back in place. It's pretty fascinating. Research has found that folks who have emotional intelligence tend to be less stressed. They have better relationships and generally have a whole lot more happiness in their life. Isn't that what we're all here for, to try to find a way to get more happiness? And I'm telling you, emotional intelligence is the way to do that. It's kind of like having an amazing emotional superpower, right? If you have a superpower, it's something that you have internally and no one can take it from you. It lets you to connect with other people. It helps keeping you in check with your emotions, so you're not all over the place and flying off the handle all the time. So watch this video and I'll talk about the 3 steps that you can start today to help you to create healthy boundaries. Okay, but before we jump in, make sure that you hit the subscribe button below and don't forget the bell notification so you don't miss out on more empowering content. So let's get started. One thing my dad used to say is that if you give someone an inch, they'll take a mile. So when you set up boundaries, most times people think it's about you putting limits on someone else. But the truth of the matter is you can only control yourself, right? So in order to create healthy boundaries, it starts with you. Okay, healthy boundaries are like a fence that you place around a beautiful garden. And, my dream is to have a beautiful garden with all types of trees and flowers and fountains and walkways and bridges and pathways and animals and birds and things, butterflies, really. Oh, I love butterflies that really gravitate to me and make a beautiful garden a place of peace and serenity for me. But in order to have a garden, you have to have a perimeter. You have to have some type of fence or boundary in order to protect what's inside the garden. And that's what boundaries are. The fence is to protect what's inside of the garden, not necessarily keep everything out. So it starts with you. So when you start to apply emotional intelligence in your life, you're nurturing your emotional garden. You're putting things inside of your mind, inside of your emotions that are perfect for the environment that you want to create. You create using the best conditions available. So like with any garden, there are skills and things that you must put into place in order to make the garden flourish, right? I just love this whole garden analogy. I just came up with that today. So you skillfully use methods and routines to help the gardens grow. You need good soil, you need nutrients, you need pruning, especially to let your garden thrive. So boundaries are the same way. There are healthy boundaries that help you do certain things within yourself, within your life, that control your thinking. Remember, I said emotions impact your thinking impact your behavior, and your behavior impacts your environment. And what's the garden but your internal environment, right? So you want to protect that at all costs. So if we talked about last week, vulnerability, if vulnerability allows you to create the environment that you desire, then boundaries help you to protect that environment. Boundaries are what keeps you consistent and steadfast on your journey for happiness. So the boundaries help you keep your peace, to keep your good health, to keep healthy relationships, to help build your self-esteem and your self-worth and nurture your ambition. So, what are healthy boundaries? They are the lines that you draw around your time, your emotions, your physical space, and your mental well being. They are the lines. And I use the term draft or design because any beautiful garden takes an architect, someone to map it out and dream about it in order to bring it to fruition. And that's what you have to do for your life. If you don't think about the condition or the direction of your life, who else is going to do it? Who else is going to be invested in it? Nobody is going to be invested in it like you are. It's yours, right? So take ownership. You're empowered to do so. So, healthy boundaries are the key to staying strong and confident and at peace with yourself. Boundaries shield you from being taken advantage of and being drained, like everyone is pulling at you from every direction. And by the time the end of the day comes, you have no energy left to do anything for yourself or anything productive. So in a nutshell, boundaries are your way of saying, hey, this is me, this is what I need, and it allows you to take ownership of it. So let's get right into it. The first step, and we're still using the garden analogy, right? The first step is to build the foundation of your garden. And you do that by examining yourself. I always talk about contemplation and taking a moment to sit back and think. It is so vitally important because if we just let what's happening in our current environment just continue to do what it does, then we're not allowing ourselves that time for contemplation. And I mean, you really have to set time aside to clear your mind, to keep out the distractions so that you can really examine yourself. So, the first examination should be of your current conditions. There's always work to be done. I always see areas of improvement in every area of my life. No matter how much or how skillful I get at certain areas or certain things, there's always areas for improvement. So I check my condition to see what condition my condition is in. That's another saying my dad used to have. So I'm always looking to see, okay, am I doing good right now? How am I really feeling? Are the things that I have surrounded myself with, including the people and the environment, the things that I do, are they conducive to the goal and the dream that I have for my life? The other important thing to examine about yourself are your emotional triggers. What are the things that send you off? What are the things that get you stuck? Where, when you get around this person or you have this conversation or you have this certain feeling, you no longer want to do anything, you just want to lay in the bed. Those are triggers. Something inspired that feeling, that caused that thinking, that resulted in that behavior. What are they? You have to examine what they are so that you can make a plan to not be triggered in the same way again. All right. And then you also, in your examination, need to find out who the violators are. Who violates your current boundaries? And what are those violations? It could be something as small as, like, when I used to work in a corporate area, it would always kind of get me upset or trigger me in a way if someone just came over to my cube and just automatically started talking. They had no regard for what I was doing. I could have been thinking, I could have been in the middle of writing something. They violated me, right? So, who are these violators and what are the violations? Only you can determine what the violations are and the people who violate them. So, you can make a plan to come up with a boundary to help construct or protect what it is that you need to protect. So, you have to develop a vision for your garden. What does your garden look like? Right? Does your garden look like when I get to work at 8:30 in the morning, I don't want to be disturbed until that first meeting that happens at 9:30. So you can set up a boundary to do that. Does your environment or your garden look like you have at least 3 hours a day for self-care, whether that be meditation, exercise, prayer, writing in your journal? Have you created a garden that's conducive for that? Maybe your garden consists of more time with your family or more intimate time with your mate. You have to design your garden, and it just doesn't haphazardly start growing, because otherwise you're going to get weeds. Okay, so you have to determine, what do you want your life to look like right now? I know that we always talk about a future plan. How do you want your future to look? What do you want to do in the future? How do you want to live in the future? But right now is where we are. The future is going to come. I get that. But right now is where things need to be addressed so that you can become the person who can do what you want to do in the future. Because right now, you're not that person who can do that. As quiet as it's kept, you got some work to do before you can become the person who can do that thing you dreamed of, because you have too much interference and chaos in your life. You are growing a field of dreams that includes weeds. Okay, so you have to prioritize the excavation of your land. You have to prioritize the work that it's going to take to pull those weeds out, to tumble the soil, to make sure that you get any insects or things that don't belong in that soil, that are not conducive to growing the things that you want to grow. You have to make sure that they are addressed, taken out, eradicated. You set up traps, you get experts in, you have to develop a plan to nurture your garden. So that might mean that you have to develop a plan where you can get more time so that you can go to school, or you can do more reading, or you can do whatever activities to get you up to speed to where you need to be. But the first thing is to develop a plan. So once you start thinking about what it is you want, how you're going to get there, and what things need to change so that you can get there, guess what the results are going to be? You'll actually have identified a purpose for your life. Most people don't know what their purpose is, or what would take to make them happy. They don't know, because they haven't taken the time to find out. But once you set up these boundaries, you'll have time to identify your purpose. Become an emotional planner so you can eradicate some of those triggers that are polluting the soil that you're building your garden upon, by becoming an emotional planner. So those things that have set you off before or delayed you from starting something, you can now push those aside, because you can handle them. You will have addressed them and know that, hey, it's not about me. That's about the other person. Or I can only control what I control. Things that I can't change shouldn't trigger me. I learn how to deal with it. And every conflict, every instance that something doesn't go your way, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It could be a lesson that you need in the first place, right? All right. So you can also, and this is the key, by starting with fresh and good soil, is build on your empowerment and relationship with God. Because God is the master gardener. He is the master architect. He is the master designer. You get the real life purpose, not just what you think you're here to do or who you're here to help. You actually, by developing time and a relationship with God, can find out what your true purpose here on earth is, and get wisdom to actually execute the plan you need to get to that point, to do what it is that you were put here to do. I mean, if you never take the time to explore that, there's somebody who is missing on something great that you have to offer, an idea, a tool, a product that you have deep inside of you. But because you haven't had time to find out what it is, you don't know how to do it, produce it, or create it. There's somebody who is waiting and missing out on the opportunity to partake on something great that you have for them. Okay, so create more time to develop your relationship with God so that you can trust what it is that you're supposed to be doing and how you're supposed to be doing it. And the other thing that setting up these healthy boundaries, this first foundation does, it helps you create more time for self-care. If you're constantly giving, day in, day out, every hour, every waking hour of the day belongs to someone else, someone else's agenda, someone else's need, that means that you don't have time for self-care. And you have to get out of your mind that self-care is a selfish thing. Listen, if you have family that depends on you, if you have someone that you are showing up for on a regular basis, if you want to do well by other people, then you have to replenish, re-energize, and rejuvenate yourself. And sometimes people think just because I'm not doing physical work that I don't get drained like someone that does physical work. But let me tell you, emotional and mental work can drain you even more. Physical work, you can sit down and relax. Your mind isn't taken up with things that other people are dealing with in ways that you want to help them, and in planning for things that so you can help stop tragedies from happening, or mishaps in your finances, or keep the house from falling down. Those type of things take more energy because it needs your emotions and brain power. Okay. So you need self care so that you can replenish that energy, so you can think rationally, so you are not always just tossing and turning based on emotions. You need the benefits of self care in your life on a regular basis. So you have to draw that boundary so that you can get it. And I mean, it might start incrementally. You might not be able to go get an hour massage every week, but you can take 30 minutes to yourself every day. You can start working out. You can have time to meditate and to pray, or just be alone in silence. Get in the car, honey, and just sit there if that's what you want to do to get that self-care, but you have to do it. So let's move on to step 2 in the gardening process to make sure that you design the boundaries that are going to protect your garden. The garden needs a maintenance crew. You can't do it alone. If your garden is going to be as fantastic as I am planning my garden to be, I can't do it by myself. If there is enjoyment in nurturing a garden, but you also need help. So in step 2, you need to build balanced and respectful relationships. So you can have relationships, and you have relationships now. But some of the reason that you're stressed and overwhelmed is because those relationships aren't balanced, or they're toxic, meaning they aren't respectful. So in order for you to have those type of relationships that help you, support you, and empower you to do what you believe is your job here on this earth, your duty on this earth, you need to do some pruning in your garden. You need to evaluate the relationships that you currently have and determine if there are ones that you need to keep, or ones that you need to step back from, or ones that you need to change, or ones that you need to nurture even more. Because not all relationships are bad. We all have some people who are contributing in a great way to our lives, and then some that are just zapping that energy. So you can determine who it is that you want to keep in your circle right now, because keep in mind, your environment includes the people that you deal with on a regular basis. They influence how you think. They influence your behavior. What you think is moral, what you think is normal, what you think is progressive, they are all influenced by the people who you're surrounded with. So the fence that the boundaries create, and I like to call it a hedge more than a fence, right? Because you're not really blocking anyone like a fortress. You really want people to partake in your garden, but you also have to have a parameter so that they know that you can't just step on my flowers now. I'm not just going to let you come in my garden anytime you want and take my cabbage out of my garden. That's not for you unless I offer it to you. So there is a reason that this fence needs to be created to protect your garden, okay? So that means that with the maintenance, you have to start pruning weeds, right, from your garden. Everything that grows naturally in your garden isn't supposed to be there. Everything that grows in your garden doesn't enhance your garden. Sometimes it can poison what you're already growing. Those little buds are so tender. When you first start planting seeds, you don't even see them. They haven't even broken the soil yet. But those buds that you are growing and nurturing, which would be your resilience, which will be you addressing those triggers, or building your self-confidence, they can be attacked by little vermins that are not supposed to be in there. So you got to start pulling weeds. You have to get some type of pesticide or something to get rid of things. You have to put little traps to get those rodents out of there. You have to create the environment, which includes the people and places and activities that you do that are conducive to your happiness. So the way that you do that most of all is to examine how you participate in these relationships. Now, I'm not saying that every relationship is going to be even. I get that. Sometimes you give a little more at a particular time in a relationship. I've done that. Sometimes you're the person who's receiving more in the relationship. You have to acknowledge it. And then when it's appropriate, change that around. But examine where you are and how you participate in relationships. Because if it's too far off, you're doing all this giving and not getting much getting, then that's a relationship that you probably don't need right now as you're developing yourself. Maybe at some point you'll have something to offer that person that really needs your help right now. But right now, while you're working on yourself, you have to decide how you're going to give your energy and give yourself to the people that you surround yourself with. And do you participate in the way that you want to? Why do you participate that way? Is it a result of something that happened in your past that maybe hasn't been addressed? Maybe you feel like, I didn't get the love from this person in my past. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe you had bad relationships, romantic relationships, and now you do more than you should in an imbalanced way. You need to figure out why you're doing that. Again, addressing the triggers are going to be the key for you having a peaceful garden. In a garden, certain plants and flowers need different things in order to get the result you want. So you have to nurture certain relationships differently than others. And that may mean that you draw back. You have to draw back sometimes. Everybody doesn't get all of you all the time, especially if they are not your centric relationships, your husband, your wife, your spouse, your children, your parents. Even your siblings, sometimes you have to determine, is this a point where I'm just going to back up a little bit? It has nothing to do with the love. It has nothing to do with that. But when you develop your own family, sometimes you have to set different parameters around your other family and types of family. Okay? So in order to get the results you want, you have to start nurturing different flowers, reducing some of the water that you give some other flowers, talking to some other flowers and plants more to get them to flourish. And that's the way that you do your garden. And make sure that you're able to ask for help from the person who can water your flowers. You got to find a person who knows the right sunlight, and find a person who knows the right nutrients to put in the plant. And then maybe one who can cut the lawn just like you want it, or do the topiaries just the way you want it. You can't do it all. So you have to know when to ask for help and get the support you need. And you got to vet that support. You have to evaluate them and make sure that they belong in your garden. So once you start being dedicated to figuring out who is the right person to do the maintenance and what type of maintenance you need, then you can communicate those needs and set reasonable expectations. Communication is the key. Remember, nobody can read your mind. And part of the stress that women feel, especially when you feel like you're torn many different ways and nobody understands you, is because you haven't communicated it or set the proper expectation. You say that you're going to show up to somebody's event and you think you're showing up as a guest, and then you show up and they put you to work. Well, wait a minute. That is draining on you. That wasn't a reasonable expectation. Somebody should have communicated with you that that's what they intended you to do. And when you got there, you just said yes. You have to let your yes be yes and your no means no. There's a way that you can communicate no that's not off-putting, but you have to say no at some point in order to save your emotions. Don't just be a yes person, a people pleaser. Take it from me. I know about people pleasing. And this is might be one of the struggles that you could have is saying no. But I show you how to you can say no, and you can. But when you let your yes be yes and your no mean no, and you set up the right expectations, it leads to better relationships. I mean, if we're talking about nurturing a garden, it leads to bigger and better blooms and buds, girl. You can get the smell and the scents. You see those beautiful butterflies. You see those flowering trees with the fruit on them. Listen, you get reduced number of conflicts. You get mutual respect in relationships when you start communicating better and setting the right expectations. And you get more and better intimacy. Listen, I talked about in last week's video, pride keeps you from the happiness you desire, about vulnerability. Again, vulnerability is the partner to boundaries, right? But vulnerability is sexy. I can't say that enough. When you want to build more intimacy in your relationships, you need to be vulnerable, but also set boundaries. And one of the boundaries that I learned to set is telling my husband every single thought that comes in my mind, especially when it's intimate time. You know, it's one thing to be your true authentic self and to share, but sharing every single thing is not what works, right? So you have to set up boundaries for yourself depending on the relationship. Now, this isn't akin to manipulation. This is how you construct effective communication, because you could just be given word service and be a walkie-talkie. That's what we call somebody who just talks, a walkie-talkie. And you know this person, they don't ever be quiet, or they talk about the wrong thing at the wrong time in the wrong setting, right? So you do have to set boundaries for yourself when discussing things. Every time to discuss something is not appropriate. And in intimate relationships, it's that way. You don't have to tell your mate every time somebody flirts with you, right? Okay, what is that doing to your relationship? That's not helping. You trying to show him that somebody else thinks you're attractive, girl, bye. He already thinks you're attractive. You don't have to show him that somebody else is thinking you're attractive because they're flirting with you. That's another topic for a different thing about trust, right? But what I'm saying is having this boundary and vulnerability mix in your intimate relationship, it gets you to the happiness you desire. So don't miss out on that step. All right. So step three is tending to the whole garden. That means setting and maintaining healthy boundaries. So right now you have established healthy soil. You have a plan for your garden. You've already planted the garden and the buds are growing. You're starting to see it flourish. You have eliminated the things that are going to eat away at your flowers or poison your plants or bring in vermin and rodents that you don't want to eat up your plants, right? So now you have to set and maintain a healthy environment for your plants to thrive. And that means that you have to have consistent maintenance and consistent boundaries. Boundaries just don't stop because you say, okay, this is my boundary, and you never have to work on it or talk about it or do anything with it again. Setting boundaries is a constant work. Life is consistently changing. You're getting new people in your life. Your environment is changing. And if you are working your plan like you're supposed to, you're having more and more situations that are new to you, more people and circumstances that are different for you. So with all of that, you'll need to construct new boundaries. And you have to remain diligent in communicating your former boundaries. So with the bling process and with the whole thing that I do, you will learn how to be the person who can manage these things. Like if right now, if your life feels all over the place, if you don't have boundaries, if you have these walls of pride because you've been hurt and you haven't addressed those hurts just yet, then you're going to need some work to do before you can become the person who can do these wonderful things that you want to do. But what I'm telling you is you can start right now. You don't have to have the whole plan all together for you to start. Okay, you don't have to have everything already in line. You don't have to know every single flower that's going to be in your garden, every type of soil, or every color you want in the garden. The first thing you need to do is own the garden, own the space, the soil, and take care of that soil, because you have to start there and then begin the process to maintain it. Gardening always needs pruning. Gardens always need pruning. They always need water. They always need soil light and nutrients and new soil and replanting, right? So you're always going to be doing something internally to get the results you want externally. It doesn't work backwards where you get the external and then the internal change happens. The transformation starts from the inside. Like I was talking about the little bud. When you first plant a seed, it takes some time before you even see the little sprout come through the sand, through the dirt. But you know that it's growing. And if you've ever done it in school, like you put a seed in a jar and you watched it, first you see the seed, then you see something coming from the seed, then you see the seed crack. All of that is going on all the time. Okay. So emotional boundaries require a process of consistent maintenance. You need a beautiful fence of boundaries to provide the right environment for the garden and to keep the pests out. So that fence is beautiful, whether it's a hedge, whether it's topiaries, whether it's a gold fence, whether it's fountains, whatever you have constructed as a parameter, a perimeter, a line drawn to identify your garden. It can be beautiful, but it also has to be maintained. So as a garden matures and the flowers get bigger, more beautiful, colorful, and vibrant, and they have a better sweet aroma, the garden flourishes. Constructing healthy emotional boundaries reinforce the self-worth and self-respect that you've been looking for, because you're now honoring your own needs and limits. And that helps to build your self-confidence. So once you have the garden and your self-confidence starts being built, then you start developing sophisticated empowerment. So what is sophisticated empowerment? So I started talking about sophistication a lot more lately, because sophistication is a word that I think closely identifies a woman who knows who she is. And when I say knows who she understands what she can control, what she can't control. She knows whose she is, right? And she's empowered to control her environment. And that requires research. She's a person who, if she's curious about something, she doesn't just take someone's word. She goes and she finds out more information. She does the work to make sure that she's going to get the result that she desires. All right. So if you're not yet that person who feels that you are empowered to control your environment and what happens in your life, well, I've got exciting news for you. On August 22nd, I'll be launching the Sophisticated Empowerment course, right? Where I'll delve deeper into mastering emotional intelligence and setting up healthy boundaries just to start. You'll gain access to transformative modules, live Q&A sessions, and a supportive community dedicated to your growth. So that is August 22nd. You can log onto my website, www.davinadandrige.com, and you can sign up for the Sophisticated Empowerment course. But you don't have to wait until August 22nd. Right now, you could grab a copy of my best-selling book, Brains and Baubles, Do What Works for You, to start growing your garden. And so again, once you start growing your garden, you can become the person that can create a nonprofit to help women, if that's what you want to do. You can go back to school because school has always been a dream of yours, but you've never had the time or felt that you've had the support to really see it through. You can feel empowered to travel, to write a book, to become a comedian. By maintaining your healthy boundaries, your self-assuredness spreads to every aspect of your life, empowering you to pursue greater and greater goals for your life. So start that garden. You're going to have to get down in the dirt. Yes, get some dirt under your fingernails, but it is so worth it. So very worth it. So I just want to thank you for joining me today. If you're excited about mastering healthy emotional boundaries, give me a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below. And stay tuned for more empowering content. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care, Sophisticate.